It's time for a quick trail ride on this old trusty ancient antiquated DRZ 400. It's not the most trail-worthy machine the way I have it re-geared back to stock gearing, but it will work for this ride today. This is just about a 5-mile long trail. You can see that it is burned back here. It's actually been burned up during 2 different fires. It's kind of overgrown where there's trees encroaching really close to the edge of the trail. So I'm just kind of riding a moderate pace today. I don't know how much of this trail follows the original path that existed before the fires. I know some of it does not, because there's been a bunch of land swaps and land sales and purchases up here. And now I have a bug to contend with in my goggles again. Whoa! And somewhere out here, there's another trail that shoots off to the right and goes down through that draw down below on my right. I have no idea where that trail is or was. I don't even know how much of that trail still exists. See, there's been a lot of wildlife walking on this trail since the last time there was any bike traffic through here. Yes, a lot of wildlife. Whoa. And this is where stock gearing sucks on this bike for trail riding. We've got another tricky spot coming up with regard to it being a challenge with this stock gearing. It's this spot right here. The ground being super loose doesn't help either. If I grab a handful of front brake and I'm still completely sliding back. I rode this trail earlier in the season and it was still relatively damp. I think that was also on my DRZ. Gotta watch out for all these tiny little stumps that are cut about 4 inches above ground level, real close to the edge of the trail. before this trail was somewhat restored, there was a very, very obscure path. So there's ribbons tied to the various points along the trail to trees and branches and whatnot, and some of the wildlife has come through and chewed the ribbon right down to the nubbin, where there's nothing left but maybe a half-inch of ribbon and then the knot where it was tied around the tree. When I first started riding this trail, it was very difficult to find the path in certain segments, and I tied some of these ribbons as well. In fact, that blue pouch above my headlight, I carry a roll of surveyor's tape, ribbon, whatever, in there. Wow, this has become more of a wildlife trail, it seems like, than a motorcycle path. Just looking at the tracks that I see right down the trail bed. It's kind of a fun trail. It'd be a lot more fun on my KTM 450. But I just didn't feel like riding that bike today. Ugh. Then it crosses this old abandoned road that goes back into some of the private property up here. So that's why this road is pretty well tore up. So we scoot up here and struggle with the stock gearing on this pig. And this stupid log. I swear I'm gonna cut that out, but I'm never up here with my saw. Now, one of the times I first came up here, I shot off that direction, thinking that that's where the trail went. And then I got mired back there where that old two-track path pretty much dead-ended, and I got off the bike and hiked all over the place trying to find the path, and finally just gave up and rode back out. And then another time I made it this far back and then went off up in there and couldn't figure out where the trail was. And finally, the way I found it was going in from the other end. So we're going to take a piece of this ribbon, tie it around the bush here. I think I'll do another one up there. The only people that really know this path are the people that have sort of restored this trail, and maybe a handful of other people that have ridden it, like myself. Well, that's a odd scenario here in my cooling fan on the DRZ run. Holy crap. It's actually pretty warm today. Then once you get off that old two-track, then the trail is a little bit more well established and easy to see. You just have to get back in there from that two-track about 50 feet or so. And I know that some of these ribbons are some that I've tied. There was one that was chewed down right to the nubbin. And then there was another time I got lost and off track right in through this area So I think what I'll do is tie. Oh, see, there's. I'm sure that I probably tied that ribbon. That actually is useless as far as being able to see it coming from the direction I'm headed. So why don't we tie one over here? It's a little bit more visible to people going the same direction I am. This is sort of a secret trail for those that know that it exists. And like a lot of people that do trail rides, we don't like to give up the locations of our secret trail all over the internet. And then we get back out in here onto a nice old abandoned Forest Service road. Whoa! And then we zig or zag through here just a little bit. That little path didn't last long on that old 2-track. And then it kind of revives itself right here. I'm not going to ride this trail all the way through as much as I'd like to. We get out across the top of that ridge and then end up kind of skirting down the side hill around a little outcropping of land, a little whatever you want to call it, knoll. And we've got a handful of switchbacks, and with this ground being burnt up and super powdery, I don't want to fight those switchbacks coming back up. So I'm going to stop before I get to that point. The trail does go all the way through. I could go down those switchbacks and then pop across a little creek. But that little creek is probably flowing pretty good with as warm as it's been the last 4 days or so. I don't want to fight with it. So then we get out onto another road. Now which way? Why am I losing my path here? Well, wow, I don't know why I've forgotten which way to go. Oh, here we are. I knew there was a old looking road that you'd take, but I couldn't remember if it was right back there where I popped out onto the road just a little ways there up or further up. And another place that I got lost was back here. I had came this direction. It was one of probably the first time that I made it this far on the trail. And then I turned around and came back and completely could not figure out where the trail was. And I parked the bike and walked around for a good 20 minutes trying to figure out where the trail was. And then at one point, then I lost track of where my bike was parked. was right kind of just up in this general vicinity, but now the trail is a very well-defined path. It was only probably a little less than a month ago that I was on this trail for the first time this year, and it's amazing how much more of a challenge it is riding it today. Not that it's a... Whoa! I thought the trail went to the left there. Not that it's that much of a challenging trail, it's just the fact that it's so dry. And the stock gearing makes it just that much more of a interesting proposition to ride it. It's so interesting how a fire can be so selective about where it goes. The fire didn't touch this area back here. At least the second fire. This area has been hit with 2 different fires. About 24 years apart. Within the next few weeks, I'll get that video uploaded of the initial trail ride I did out here this season, which was when I was on my DRZ 400, and I rode the trail all the way through. And down at that little creek crossing, there's a makeshift bridge, which neither of us that were on the ride that day were willing to risk going across. So we both manhandled our bikes through the little creek. And going through the creek crossing the way I'm going today is much easier than it is to go the other direction. Because on this side there's a little log embedded in the ground, which is a drop off into the creek bed. And it would be very, very difficult to get a bike up over that coming through the opposite direction I'm going today. Now this area you can see completely got torched during the more recent fire, which has been 6 years ago now. Wow, time flies. It doesn't seem like it's been that long ago. My suspicion is that the majority of people that ride this trail ride it in this direction for the same reason I mentioned regarding that creek crossing and the log step to get up out of the creek if you were to go the opposite direction I'm going today. After the initial fire 30 years ago this year, this trail, it still existed on the maps for a few years, but it eventually got written off and removed from the maps because nobody ever came back through and restored it. And due to the fact that a bunch of salvage logging obliterated sections of the trail back where I initially got onto it, as well as various land swaps, the Forest Service just gave up on it because of the fact that the original path now crossed some segments of land that had been sold, swapped, traded, whatever. Now out here, I can see the trail on the far side, so we scoot around this little draw to the left, and I will probably turn around before I get to that, I think, because the trail sort of drops down through a little drainage. There wasn't any water flowing down that, but it could during a heavy rain. That's providing I find a spot where I can actually turn around. If I can't, then I'll continue on out. So the trail I can see it way out that direction, so it skirts around that hill and then zigzags down. There's, I don't know, 5 or 6 switchbacks, or 4 or 5, or something like that. So here's the little draw that it goes down through. It is going to be best if I just go out around that first hill, and the terrain should flatten out a little bit where I can get a nice spot to turn around. Stop gearing on the DRZ is 1544, and I had re-geared it to 1447 back in 2006 when I bought this bike. So there's our first very minor switchback. So I guess I sort of forgot that the trail meanders its way down this hillside, switchbacks a few times, skirts down low, and then goes around the corner. So I think this is probably the best spot to turn around at. So I'll catch up with you when I get turned around and resituated here.